I was 8 when I first heard it, not from strangers, not from neighbors, from my own sister. Get out. Adopted kids aren't allowed in my room. She said it casually, like it was a rule everyone already knew, like it was obvious, like I should have understood my place without being told. I stood there, holding the toy we were supposed to share, confused more than hurt. I didn't fully understand what adopted meant at that age. I only understood that it made me different in her eyes. Unwanted. Temporary. I walked away quietly. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't cry. I just tucked the words somewhere deep inside me, where children store things they don't know how to process. As we grew older, the comments didn't stop. They became sharper, more deliberate. You're not really part of this family. They only adopted you because they felt bad. One day you'll have to leave anyway. Each sentence landed softly on the outside, but carved something heavy on the inside. My parents never noticed, or maybe they did and chose to ignore it, thinking it was normal sibling teasing. But it wasn't teasing. It was exclusion. It was a quiet reminder that I didn't belong in a house where everyone else shared blood. I started spending more time alone, in my room, in books, in silence. I learned early how to stay out of the way, how to be less visible, how to take up less space. But I also learned something else. I learned how to be independent, how to rely on myself, how to build a world inside my head where no one could tell me I didn't belong. By the time I was a teenager, my sister had perfected the art of saying cruel things with a smile. In front of relatives, she would joke, "You know she's adopted, right?" As if I were a fun fact, not a person. People would laugh awkwardly. I would smile politely. And later, I would sit alone, wondering why it hurt so much. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way she said them, with certainty, like she had authority over who belonged and who didn't. One evening, when we were both older, she said it again, clearer than ever. Get out. Adopted kids aren't allowed. But this time, I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel small. I felt tired of being reminded that I was seen as temporary in a place I had called home for years. I looked at her calmly and walked away without a word. That night, lying in bed, I made a quiet decision. I would stop trying to prove I belonged. I would stop waiting for acceptance from someone who had already decided I didn't deserve it. If I didn't belong there, I would build a place where I did. And slowly, over the years, that's exactly what I started doing. After that night, something shifted inside me. I stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped trying to earn a place that should never have required permission. My sister continued with her remarks, but they no longer landed the same way. They felt predictable, repetitive, almost desperate. What hurt before now felt revealing. I began focusing on school, on small goals, on anything that moved my life forward without needing anyone's approval. Teachers noticed the change. I became quieter, but more determined. I spent hours in the library, not because I loved studying, but because it was the one place no one questioned my presence. At home, the atmosphere stayed the same. My sister dominated conversations. My parents listened to her stories, laughed at her jokes, praised her achievements loudly. Mine were acknowledged politely, briefly, then forgotten. I learned not to expect applause. I learned to build confidence without witnesses. Years passed, and I graduated with excellent grades. I earned a scholarship to a university far from home. When I told my parents, they were proud, but surprised, as if they hadn't expected me to go that far. My sister laughed and said, "Well, at least you won't be in my space anymore." I smiled. That's the plan. Moving out felt like breathing for the first time. My tiny dorm room felt more like home than the house I had lived in for years. No one questioned my right to be there. No one reminded me that I was different. I worked part-time jobs, studied hard, and slowly built a life that belonged entirely to me. I made friends who knew nothing about my past. To them, I was just me, not the adopted one, not the extra, just a person. That normalcy healed something deep inside me. Over time, I graduated, found a stable job, and built a career I was proud of. I rented my own apartment. I furnished it slowly, carefully, choosing every item with intention. Each chair, each lamp, each picture frame was a quiet statement. I belong here. I didn't visit home often. When I did, my sister's tone hadn't changed much, but now it sounded hollow, forced, like she was trying to keep an old dynamic alive that no longer existed. One afternoon, during a family gathering, she said it again, almost jokingly, in front of relatives. You know she's adopted, right? But this time, the room didn't laugh. An aunt looked confused. A cousin frowned. Someone changed the subject awkwardly. The joke had aged poorly. I realized then that her power over me had only existed when I believed her words. Now, they sounded childish, small. Later that evening, my mother pulled me aside. You've changed, she said softly. I grew up, I replied. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand what that meant. The real turning point came years later, when my parents decided to downsize and move to a smaller house. They needed help, financial help, logistical help, emotional support. My sister, who still lived nearby, was too busy, too occupied with her own life, too uninterested. They called me. For the first time, I was the one they relied on. I arranged movers, handled paperwork, took time off work to be there. I didn't do it for validation. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because I had become the kind of person who shows up even when others didn't. During that process, my father found old documents, adoption papers, letters, photographs from the day they brought me home. He sat quietly looking at them for a long time. You were so small, he murmured. We were so happy that day. I watched his expression change from nostalgia to realization. He began to understand what those years must have felt like for me, what it meant to grow up hearing that I didn't belong while he believed he had given me a home. My sister was there too. She stayed silent, watching this unfold. For the first time, no one laughed. No one made jokes. No one mentioned the word adopted like it was a label. It was simply a fact of how I joined the family, not a measure of my place in it. That evening, as we sat together in the nearly empty living room, my father said quietly, "You've done more for us than we ever realized." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to, because the truth had finally surfaced on its own, not through arguments, not through confrontation, but through years of quiet growth, independence, and character. My sister's words had once made me feel like an outsider, but in the end, they pushed me to build a life so strong that I no longer needed to ask where I belonged. Years later, no one used the word adopted like a weapon again. Not my sister, not my parents, because my actions had answered every doubt. I didn't fight for a place in the family. I built a life so solid that belonging was no longer a question.